Welcome back to From Corporate to Cashflow. We are Andrea Cannon and Liz Schwab, two pharmacists navigating the process of building time and financial freedom through real estate, investing, and lending while still working our day jobs. Navigating the journey is difficult, but our podcast guests are experts in showing us how it's done. And today we have a wonderful guest here with us today, and it's Tanner Litchfield. Tanner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Hi, Tanner. Nice to see you again. Of course, I think you do a fantastic job on social media and marketing, make yourself well known. So what I got the gist of is that you moved here from Washington, but we would love to hear more of like your past, what brought you to Utah, and what you are actively doing today in real estate.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll kind of, start with the journey in general. I think as soon as I got out of college, even in college, really, I've always been obsessed with real estate. I wanted to be a dentist. Like that was what I thought I wanted to be. I had a family friend that made really good money, worked 4 days a week and had a cabin, like just seemed to live like the perfect life. And so that's what I thought I wanted to do. And it was 100% money motivated. I've always been motivated by money since a young age. And so that was my journey. And up until my sophomore year of college, that was my plan. And I had this essay that I had to draw up about why I wanted to be a dentist, and it really put things into perspective of like, geez, I just want this. I just want the money. I don't really want to dig in people's teeth.
You're like, oh crap, I don't have anything like legit to say here.
Yeah, exactly. And part of that actually was to interview one of the people that motivated you to get into that career, right? So he was a good family friend. I reached out to him, jumped on a call with him, and he was like, don't do it. No one likes going to the dentist. It's not a happy environment. If it's just about the money, there's plenty of other ways to make money. And so I was like, goodness, this is like the person that I wanted to be like telling me don't do it. And so it kind of put me onto this trying to figure things out journey. And it was always to do with freedom and money. That's like the combo that I was after. And so long story short, real estate was what kept coming up. It's like your ceiling's not really capped in this industry. And if you invest well, if you invest long-term, then you can have passive income to supplement your freedom, right? So that was super enticing to me. I don't know how much you want me to talk on this. I'm kind of giving
no, that's great. Yeah, but I think you had said that you were in tech sales previously, right? Doing the W-2, and then you're maybe doing some real estate on the side. So maybe just like your journey in what your W-2 to trying real estate and then making the jump to like full-time real estate, kind of like what motivated you and how you ultimately got there.
For sure. Yeah. So out of college, it wasn't necessarily the active income of real estate that I was drawn to at that moment. It was buy and hold to get that passive income. So now my next step was how to figure out how to get capital fast. And so I jumped into sales, tech sales, and did pretty good at that. But my passion was still burning inside me of real estate. So a couple of years into that, I was making pretty good money. I decided that I was going to go full-time wholesale. So I guess rewind a little bit. While I was in tech sales, I was operating as a wholesaler part-time, finding deals for other investors, trying to get my active income up as much as possible so that I could buy my next deal. That was always the motivating factor, is how can I get my next deal? How can I get my next deal?
Was that pretty hard to manage, like trying to do both of those at the same time?
It was. Yeah. I mean, it was hard to be successful at both. Now, my passion was towards real estate. So I pretty much did the bare minimum to hit quota in my sales gig. And the rest of my energy was spent towards real estate. So I was still doing well. in my sales gig. Like they were happy with me. Like, especially at the very beginning. Like, yeah, I was doing well, but, as soon as I felt like I was aiming towards that quota, my energy was all real estate. So, yeah, I jumped into the wholesale world and realized like 6 months into it that it was not what it cracked to be, being a full-time wholesaler. So I fell flat in my face there, and I can expound on that if you'd like me to, but that was my first entrepreneurial fail.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely don't mean to cut you off, but you said something that I want to comment on. So you said that you like fell flat on your face and it was your first fail. So I want to commend you on your honesty and openness on both your success, but more particularly your failures. I think that a lot of times people get into real estate thinking that it's going to be one, easy, and two, that they're not going to have any problems whatsoever. And I feel like sometimes there's not a lot of transparency around that. And I feel like you do a really good job of letting people know, like, hey, these are the downfalls. This is where I messed up. And that there are areas that are like more difficult, where there are some barriers, right? Like your sub 2 deal that you allude to as well. So I just want to commend you for that, because I think that you are the voice of, the good and the bad, and not just the good. So that when people are evaluating jumping into real estate, they have like the full picture, right? So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just thought that was like really important. And I wanted to thank you for that. Yeah.
I appreciate it a
Yeah,
ton.
of course. So you ultimately end up moving to Utah, become a full-time real estate agent, right?
Yeah. So once that wholesale operation I ended up racking up 40 grand in debt, like credit card debt, trying to figure it out. Like, did not want to give up. But yeah, we were almost this weird dynamic of I needed to pay my mortgage. I needed to pay for my wife and I's life, which wasn't much, but still, when you have other mouths to feed, I decided it was time to jump back into tech sales. And so I jumped back into tech sales. And then 6 months later is when my wife, we had this long discussion that Seattle wasn't a place for us long term. And so Utah was in the mix now. So, yeah.
And what are you mostly focusing on now?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we want to fast forward a little bit, so right when I moved to Utah, that's when I decided, hey, I'm going to jump all into real estate again. This is only 6 months later, but I felt like it was an opportunistic time. When we sold our home in Seattle, we made really good money on it. And so I was no longer in that bind of credit card debt and no money in my bank account. And so I was in a new environment. I had that hunger, and I was well capitalized with our live-in flip that we sold. And so my exact plan was to be a realtor that would replace my tech income. And then I was going to work my butt off to also add supplement income with wholesale. And so I still wanted to wear both hats of this investor agent world. And so that's what I decided I was going to do. And I still do that to this day, just adding different business ventures to it. So
that's awesome. And were you a realtor back in Washington also, or was this an entire like almost career change at once?
An entire career change. I was licensed only for my own endeavors. I had never represented a client, never called myself a realtor, only for my own acquisitions and that sort of thing. So yeah, I would not call myself a realtor by any means in Seattle.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's quite the change. And I know even more recently, you had another change where you were previously with a whole group and now you're kind of out solo. Like, what made you kind of take the leap to go out on your own as well?
Yeah. So quite honestly, that was always the time. Like, that was always the plan for me to go complete solo. My plan that I drew up in my head is I'm going to join a team that produces at a high level. And I'm going to gain experience as a realtor much faster. I'm going to have more stable income because I'm going to have lead flow. And so that was my plan. Like I can build my database. I can build, cause I didn't really have a database here in Utah, right? Being from Seattle, born and raised in Seattle. So that was my plan. I'm going to be here for 2 years. I'm going to build my experience much faster than if I was solo. And the cool part about that is like when you have leads, it's almost very similar to tech sales, right? It's like, here's your leads, manage your pipeline effectively, follow up. And then, so I took my tech sales experience and my investment background experience just to talk the language of real estate, and it took off. Like I did much better than I thought I would. So that 2-year plan was sped up much faster. And so, yeah, I decided that I've been in Utah for like 2.5 years now. And I've been doing my own thing for close to a year now. So.
That's really awesome. Quite the pivot. I mean, you've done this many times, and it's funny to me how, like the tech sales world can wrap itself into real estate. And I love that you were like kind of building in the background, right, while you were getting ready to do real estate, and then ended up doing it twice. And yeah. I know that Liz kind of mentioned this already, but I do think it's really cool that you're sharing kind of both the pros and cons of going for it, because you hear so many people say like, oh, I took the risk and I, made all these moves, and then it ends up that they, are just sharing like the wins and don't share that it took them maybe a couple of times, even though that I know that your story isn't unique. Yeah. And so like, it's really cool that, you made that switch for sure. Thinking about your journey in general, like what's the biggest lesson you've learned that you wish you knew earlier in that journey?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. Maybe not a lesson, but just kind of going back to what you said, and the reason what motivates me to share the true like wins and losses. One of the main reasons I got into real estate in the first place is it felt like an industry that no matter how much I failed, there's always going to be money in this industry. And so whether it's 2 years, whether it's 10 years, as long as I have like the passion, as long as I like stay steadfast and focused on it, then I'll have success. That was like my vision. And every time I fall flat on my face, which like, if you talk to some of my mentors in Seattle, has happened like way too many times, but I'm just like very, very stuck. My passion's in real estate. If I fail, it's a learning lesson. I'm going to get back up, like wipe my, yeah. So anyways, that's like my true intent with sharing the true wins and losses is this is an industry that rewards you for sticking through it. And so that's what I love about it. There's so many years of history to prove real estate can build you this amazing life. And so that's kind of what I made my bet on. But yeah, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned through the past is consistency yields results. Like that's one of the biggest things. If anyone's learned anything from me, it's like day in, day out, there's always going to be activity. There's some days that I'm going to take some time off. Like today, I enjoyed a nice 18 rounds of golf and I didn't feel guilty about it. I got a good deal under contract and it's a good one. And like, but I'm always, every single day, I am putting forth revenue generating activities, whether it's posting on social media, calling people, follow-ups. And the hard part is people give up way too soon. Before that snowball starts to kick in, they give up way too soon. So like my advice is people always call it the motivation. I don't feel motivated. Yeah, I don't feel motivated a lot of days too. It's the discipline that you have to create within yourself. If you can't create that discipline in real estate, like it's going to be a tough world out there for you to make your way. So
I totally agree with that. I think real estate definitely requires motivation, but to your point, the consistency and to do things consistently when you're not motivated, right? Because you see so frequently people saying, you know, well, I tried. And you're like, well, did you actually try? Like, how long did you do it for? Were you consistently putting things in motion, or were you just like absorbing information? Or were you just on meetings where you actually weren't actively doing anything, you know, putting things towards your workload? So I know you're very intentional with that. I've seen different posts where you're going through, you know, every single minute of the day, like you're tracking what you're doing, and like you got it nailed down, right? So I think that's a really interesting point, that it definitely requires consistency. And, you know, we were going to ask, because we're always interested what the motivations are for people to like leave their W-2, but it sounds very apparent that you've always had a passion for real estate. And I know you said that maybe some days you aren't motivated, but you sound pretty darn motivated to be successful in real estate. So obviously it sounds like it made a lot of sense for you to leave that W-2, albeit sounds like you were successful in tech, to transition to real estate full time. And obviously, I mean, I don't know your personal finances, but it looks like you're doing really well, especially from transitioning from Washington to Utah. I know that you've created a really great community, and several people obviously know you, and you've done a lot, and you have your local meetup. Do you want to talk about that, the meetings that you're organizing?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it all comes down to like, I'm a firm believer in personal brand, like especially coming from a new environment where I had worked so hard on my personal brand, and the people I was surrounded around in Seattle, I felt like I had the ticket to success. It's like my network and people knew what I did. And so that was tough for me leaving that behind. And so I was extremely motivated to create that in a much shorter amount of time. And so like building the Beehive investment community was a big part of that. I had run events at a high level in Seattle. And so it was just creating that here in a short amount of time. And so that was the whole purpose behind it. And so one thing I'll add too is like the amount of people that have come to me in Utah and said, hey, Tanner, like I have not seen someone jump into success in this level of production and like your brand, like I've never seen anyone do it this fast. And it's funny because people think it's fast in Utah, but they don't understand that I've been posting every day on social media for 4 years now. I've been like psychotically passionate about real estate for 7 years. And so people in Utah, because they just know me, I've been practicing these skills for a really long time. And I just came into a new market and implemented those as fast as I could. But yeah, it's been a long journey.
Yeah. To your point, they haven't seen like the grind that you've been putting in for like the past several years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So to your point, just going back to the consistency definitely leads to results and, you know, that fast timeline that you're alluding to, even though you've been putting in the work. So I guess kudos to you.
I appreciate it. It's not a get rich quick. That's all I'm trying to say. It doesn't
No, for
make
sure.
me, yeah,
For
it's just,
sure.
it's a long game. So.
Most definitely. I mean, I think, you know, you mentioned the consistency, and it's funny for me, we have people that come to us all the time that say, hey, like I really wanted to get into real estate. And so, you know, we have a wholesaling team and we'll try to plug people in, right? They're like, I want to get my first deal. And it's so awesome. Like that first week, we give them a list of people to call, and they call and they don't get any deals that first week, and they just completely fall off the wagon, and I don't hear from them ever again. And it's just one of those funny things about that consistency piece, because they were probably super close on like 5 deals had they just continued to follow up and continued to show up every day, right? And also honing that muscle of being able to talk to people, sellers, agents, anybody about getting, you know, a deal all the way through, right? And so it's just, I love that you're harping on that consistency thing, because I think it's just so important in real estate. And it's really a lot about just showing up and doing work. Like Liz highlighted, not just like listening to, you know, Zoom calls or something like that, right? Like it's actually making the calls, actually going out and doing the door knocking, actually doing the prospecting, you know, meeting with sellers, you know, for you as an agent, you know, all the things, right? Like driving for dollars, however you're making your money in real estate, right? So I love that you're highlighting that. thinking specifically about that consistency, I'd love to learn a little bit more. When you have tech sales and you have that quota, right? It's kind of somebody telling you what to do, right? They have that quota piece. You have to meet it, whether it's 5 sales, whether it's 50 sales. I don't know what it was, the size of your product, but just thinking about like the habits and routines that you have to have now that you're an entrepreneur, and how that's different from when you had a W-2, and kind of any tips or habits, tricks, routines that you've developed to kind of make sure that your days are, staying on track.
Yeah. I'll first highlight that it's completely different than the tech world, a W-2, where you have a manager telling you what to do, but you also have the threat of you could lose your job, and that tends to motivate people. But and it sounds so cliche, but there's a reason it's so popular. Is if your why is not strong enough, you'll never survive as an entrepreneur. Like the amount of times that, like, that's one thing that I'll like pat myself on the back is I've never quit. I don't think I'm smarter than the average human being. I don't think that I have these specific traits that other people don't have. Like, I genuinely feel like the way I've found success in this industry is like just pure determination that I know this is where I want to be, and my why is strong. Like I want to create this life for my family. I want to have freedom, and it's burning. And it's kind of funny when you rewind. It's like that first time that I failed, I tasted it a little bit, but like the honest truth was I didn't want it bad enough. Like I was obsessed with real estate, but that wasn't enough. And that second time when I moved to Utah, and I had a lot more reasons to push myself in every level, that's really when I took off, right? And so when I look back on it, it's really discovering and honing in on that why. And sometimes it's falling flat on your face. Like I've lost 180 grand on a deal with Sub 2 that, you mentioned, Liz. Like I've lost on multiple deals in flips. So it's like, if you were to magnify my losses, most people would say, like, how the hell are you still doing this? But if you magnify my wins, then it looks like I'm on top of the universe, right? And so it's really having that patience and that determination just to stick with it. And so I'm glad I did, and it's been a lot better. I'm trying to narrow down those losses, but we're constantly learning. So
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes you need those losses to move forward, right? Of course, it would be great to not experience those, obviously. But sometimes they build like better blocks of information and connections that would have never happened, right? I know I can speak for myself of a certain loss and the growth that occurred from that. The problem is that a lot of people quit after that, right?
Yeah.
So they don't grow, they don't continue. So we got to just keep moving forward, like you said, with that consistency. And eventually, if you stick with it, and you are smart about your decisions, you will be successful.
Yeah.
And on that same line of thought, so obviously we are involved in real estate in different capacities, right? So Andrea and I still have our full-time jobs while we're still involved in real estate. You're doing real estate full-time. So for other people that are beginning their financial journey with real estate, do you have like a 30-second set of advice for them? I know we already talked about the consistency over motivation, but for someone who's very new in this, whether they want to do lending, purchase their own real estate, do STR, whatever that might look like, what piece of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, if they're in the interested column, like I always try and divvy these out between like interested and committed. The people that are interested in real estate are not going to make it until they are committed, right? And so in that capacity, if you're in that interested column, that's completely fine. But like, I would take advantage of that interested column and be a complete sponge. Like, you have to be reading like Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you haven't read that, you should read that probably 3 times before you get into the space. Like, I know it's, again, cliche. There's a reason that people bring it up so much. It's the simplicity behind investing. I think like just being a sponge with podcasts, with books, I think this is an important step to realize what avenue you want to go into. Because if you bring that interested mentality to an industry where there's 1,000 ways to make $1 million, you are going to be a kid in a candy shop and you're never going to pick your candy. Like you're just going to be looking around and this is amazing. I'm going to learn as much as I can. But until you find that lane that resonates with you, with your personality type, with your skills, etc., like it's going to be really hard to get pushed into that committed category. Like I never want to be a full-time wholesaler. I don't want to run a wholesale operation. It took like failing at that to understand that. But that's what I feel like. So looks like we lost Andrea.
Yes, indeed. So I'm going to ask you other questions until she comes back, if that's okay. And then we'll figure it out.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're actually focusing on now, though? Is it more seller financing, or like what are your immediate, I guess, needs and like wants right now in your journey?
Yeah. So this is kind of an interesting topic that I'm actively figuring it out. I have definitely a sense of direction. I've kind of had this mindset shift of I spent so much energy, especially back in the tech world, of how am I going to get my next deal? How am I going to get my next deal? And I was analyzing all these deals. I was just like so ingrained into picking up my next property. And now I've tried to shift that mentality and that energy to how can I make more money faster. And so I've almost like put buying not on pause. I still will buy if a good deal comes up, but my whole mentality is I want to net $1 million. And so by netting $1 million, that is going to open up a lot of different investment opportunities for myself. And it's going to accelerate my passive income goals, my freedom goals. So that's where a lot of my energy has been placed. Now, with that being said, like my plan, I have my goals right up here, and I'll just read them off. Riverstone, which is my small mini team that I'm extremely strict on who I let in. I want to get that to 1 million GCI. I want to get my personal GCI, which is gross commission, to 600,000 this year. I want to net $1 million. Like I said, I have my social media following goals. I want to get my golf handicap to single digits. Like that's literally written up there. So my whole mentality, like I've honed in on how I'm going to net $1 million, and it's building out my team, and it's really being specific about who I'm targeting. So my whole business model right now is how I can get more wealthy clients that I can be their go-to real estate consultant. I want these people to be able to buy 2 or 3 rentals a year. I want these people to utilize me for their primary. I want to be like a thorough real estate consultant for people that make good money. They're much easier to deal with. They are less emotional about their purchases. My life's a whole lot easier. I can spend half, like maybe even, I'm not exaggerating, like a quarter of the time to get these type of clients 3 deals by the time I get a first-time home buyer that's shopping for a $350,000 house, that one deal. And it's nothing against them. I completely understand they need more hand-holding. It's just like,
I believe it. It sounds kind of crazy, but it makes sense when you think about it. So yeah.
For sure. So that's my whole business model. That's why golf has been ingrained into my business model too, with the country club. And that was a big boy step of me, is joining that Riverside. So like, I'm very intentional about my decisions, and it's being surrounded around more of those, my ideal target audience. So
that's awesome. It sounds like you've come a long way so far, and those goals are super exciting. So I can't wait to hear when you've checked those off. I think leading from the golf question, topic, both me and Liz are interested in traveling and getting outside and having fun kind of on this process, right, of financial and time freedom. And that's really one of our main goals, right? And so we'd love to hear a little bit more about something that's either like a bucket list adventure for you or something you're looking to accomplish this year, kind of related to like a bucket list sort of thing. And I'm thinking it might be golf related. Love to hear.
It is. Sadly, my life surrounds around golf. And I'm not even good. Like, obviously, I'm trying to get to single digit handicap. So clearly not a pro there, but I'm just, it got me hooked. And so, the bucket list, the country club has always been a huge bucket list item for me. It always felt like something that was 5 years out. It was always going to be 5 years out because it's a huge capital commitment. And I just, like, after talking with some of my mentors and seeing it more as an investment versus a capital allocation, like, that's really what shifted my mind. So that was a huge bucket list item for me, is joining that. But like, also my wife and I love to travel, and it's kind of cool with where I'm at in my career is I get to mix travel and work, and it's been this cool thing, right? So like in Maui, in 2 months we are going to Maui. Kind of ruined that surprise, but we're going to Maui, and I'm interviewing Brandon Turner on my podcast, who's been like, it's a crazy full circle moment because he was like one of the first voices that taught me real estate investing. And so being able to kind of combine work and pleasure has been a massive blessing. And so I'm excited to continue building upon that, but it's been an exciting journey. And I can promise you, Andrea, that golf and travel will also be there. Is when I can get these bucket list courses checked off. That's a huge aspect of it. Now it's just figuring out how to bring the wife as excited to go to Georgia or North Carolina that I am. So
I love it. Are you going to play Kapalua while you're there?
Oh yeah, that's the goal. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. That's like mixing all the things, right? You've got Brandon Turner, you've got Kapalua, you've got the travel. I mean, like, it sounds like this is just awesome.
Yeah, exactly. It's our first trip with our 4-month-old. So that's going to be the wild card. So.
Awesome. Well, hey, Tanner, thank you so much for sharing all this information. I love hearing about your story. I think it's super interesting and really just shows that consistent hard work pays off. And so I think you were like the prime example of consistency. So thanks for sharing that, obviously.
Of course.
And then for anyone that's like listening or viewing the podcast, what is the best way for them to get in contact with you if they want to collaborate with you or work with you or, just stay up to date with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest platforms that I'm trying to build right now are Instagram and YouTube. And so I'm the Investor Tanner. If you search my name, it'll come up too. But I'm pretty good about responding to DMs. Not perfect, but I try. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me is just DM me on Instagram. So.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that people can connect with you from this as well. But thank you so much for being on here today. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode from Corporate to Cashflow. And we are looking forward to having you on listening back next week.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.